Hi guys, it's Supper here. This is the second part of the interview with Mr. Shawn Gately. This time we're talking about painting. Do you think that painting is the important part of the hobby?
Well, that depends on the person. So you've asked a highly subjective question. But for me, I like painting more than playing, for sure. Back when I was just a hobbyist, I would paint a unit every week, at least. And so what I would do is I'd show up at my local hobby shop and just set up a little diorama with all the models I had painted that week. And so my gaming group, they would, they'd come in and they'd be able to see something that I had done every week. And so I very much enjoy the painting aspect of it. And I enjoy playing in the sense of just having fun with friends and, keeping it very light.
And what about the people that would like to play with painted miniatures but ain't got no skill or maybe because of some other reasons can't paint their armies by themselves?
That phenomenon has given rise to the miniatures assembly and painting industry. So contact Blue Table Painting and have us paint for you. That's my answer to that question. Or get a good service. There's a lot of really great soloists out there. I would just take care to see, what their background is and how long they've been around. One thing, if I may, one thing to look for when looking for a painting service is track record. Actually go onto their website and see how many projects they've done. Because if a painter has, maybe less than 10 projects under their belt, they're just getting started. And it might be a great relationship. It might work out. I'm not saying you shouldn't give a new guy a chance, but definitely look at the track record of how many projects that person has done and over how long of a time. So, like if you go back and you see they've done 10 projects, but it's been in the last 3 years, they're only finishing one project or three projects a year, three or four. So that's my advice for somebody that just likes to play and doesn't like the assembly and painting part of it.
What do you think are the most important things for the beginner painters?
Oh, okay. Well, I've always felt that there were a lot of other entities besides me that were doing like how-to videos and stuff like that. But if I were a new hobbyist, or let's say you came to me and said, "Well, Shawn, what do I need to do?" Well, I'd say for assembly, you need an X-Acto knife. You need plastic glue. Common mistake for the new hobbyist is to try and super glue everything together. When plastic kits, plastic gets for plastic gets, you really do want plastic glue like testers. And I would get a Dremel and various small drill bits, get some wire or brass rod for pinning. Learn how to pin. That's really a big deal, especially if you're dealing with metal figures. And also catalyst. That's a huge thing that people miss is how to use super glue catalyst correctly. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting there holding these pieces together. It's get it on your fingers. I remember one time I was trying to glue the two halves of a Space Marine together, and I was like, "Hold, this is way, way, way back when I was first started." I held it, and I held it, and I held it, and then I pulled it apart. Yeah, it would work, and both sides were the two sides were glued to two fingers, and I was just like, "Oh!" I actually started when I first started in '98. I tried to use hardware store two-part epoxy putty, and which requires that you let it cure overnight. So I had like little scaffoldings built up around my Tyranids to hold them into place so the epoxy could cure overnight. It was nonsense. So yeah, super glue, catalyst, good Dremel for pinning, and of course plastic glue. And some good flush clippers.
Do you have any advice for the beginner painters that would make their lives a little bit easier?
Okay, sure. Let me just walk you through a quick recipe. When you're starting to paint an army, especially if it's all kind of the same guys, come up with a recipe first. Don't just try and do it all at one time. So typically for a model, this is the stages you might use. Prime black or whatever. Prime black, do an overspray either with an acrylic spray can. And by the way, you can get really good results with that. They're kind of like the poor man's airbrush. Or you can airbrush on. So now you get like a two-tone, right? Then you're going to want to put on a wash, then a highlighting dry brush. And dry brushing, by the way, people, it's almost like, oh, you just dry brush your things. Yeah, well, there's good dry brushing and there's not so good dry brushing. So, just learn to do it well, get a good brush for it. You'll get a great effect. So, and you can switch those steps 3 and 4. So you might dry brush the model, then wash it to get it down. And then a highlight, and then that's your basic tabletop paint job right there. And I think a lot of people run into trouble because they try and paint by numbers. They see this figure and they're like, okay, I'm going to put brown here, I'm going to put white here, I'm going to put blue here, and it looks terrible because it's more of an organic process to get a good finished effect. And it's not always what you think. So for example, I've seen my guys do black prime and then they put a rust layer on it, which is like this kind of dark brownish red color, and that just shades this out really nice. And then they'll dry brush the whole thing with pale sand, like an ivory color. So and then I'm just like, what? But it works. And then you start putting on your colors on top of that, and it gives it kind of this just really organic feel to it. And it's very simple to do, and it's very forgiving. It's a very forgiving method. And then of course you can do your highfalutin techniques, OSL, wet blending. Um,
In many tutorials, painters use loads of different terms, and I know that two in particular are most difficult to understand for the beginner painters. So what is the difference between priming and base coating?
oh, right. Well, in a way, I've touched on that already. Priming is an initial layer that you put on the model so that the paint will stick to the plastic or the metal, and that it's really the basic first step that you've got to do. Just a few tips here. One is when you're priming, um, try and have a surface that's right about your shoulder level. And that way, when you're priming, you'll actually get better coverage and you won't miss the cracks of the model. Or you have to set them on their back. But the problem is, you set your models on the side, you can have a thing where the primer is actually kind of a liquid, and so it'll dry your models to the surface that you're priming on. The second thing is, don't prime like in your driveway, like directly on the concrete, because you'll leave stains there. And actually get some height with some cardboard boxes or whatever it is that you're going to use.
And base coating?
Yeah, base coating. Now, and I touched on that as well. Base coating for me means preliminary shading levels that you're putting on in moss. So base coating could be, like I said, an acrylic spray or an airbrush where you get like a two-tone, and you do that almost like applying hairspray. So you get the color coming from the same direction as the light, so that the model actually starts to look shaded out just from that one step. And then of course you can block out your colors and then either wash them down or you can highlight them up. And there's different ways to do it. You can either start with a very bright color and then you can dull it down by putting on washes, or you can start with a very dull color and work up from there and put on like higher layers, or a combination of both. My personal favorite is to highlight it up or dry brush the color up and then wash it back down. So when I paint and I'm doing something like lots of something, it's generally the last stage is a wash. But that's just me. That doesn't mean that all my painters use that technique.
Some time ago you created a tutorial for organizing your painting workspace. Can you tell us a few words about it?
Well, yeah, there's two aspects to this. One is speed and the other is comfort. So for comfort, I would recommend a common mistake for new painters is that they leave the table at the normal height, and tables are designed for eating off of, but not for painting. So you actually want to raise your table up about 4 or 5 inches, and you'll be painting at a much more comfortable height. The second thing is get a good chair and stretch out about every hour at least. But if your chair has to be low, spread your legs just a little bit and then cross your legs back underneath, almost like a cobbler's pose, and that'll help your your back. But that's not as good as actually raising up your workstation. So, and get a good chair. Okay, now for speed, first off, brace your hands on the edge of the table. That'll give you stability. I see a lot of artists, they kind of lean back in their chair and their painting is like flying like 2 feet out in front of them. And then to get water or another color, they have to reposition themselves and like go way over here and get paints. No. Condense it all down to like a 12-inch square. How many centimeters would that be? For
It is 30 centimeters.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So I could do that in my head if I.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But keep everything close, and your model's close too. So, like, let's say this was my painting station, I would have my palette here. I'd have my my paper towel here to dry my brushes, and I'd have my water dish above that, and then I have my lamp right here, and literally like everything touching in a very small space. And I keep your water dish very shallow, so you don't have to like go very far to go up and over. And also put water on your palette, because then you can water down your paints to the right consistency without going too far for it. And then don't scatter your models all over your table. Keep it all very tight. So I would do step A and I'd move all my models over here. And I'd do step B and I'd move my models all back. So they're passing over this relatively small area. So that like I can almost, your hands should not be moving more than 4 inches, which 10 centimeters. Shouldn't be moving very far.
And one small advice from me. Make sure that your drinking water is far away from your water for cleaning brushes.
You've all done it, Peter.
And this will be all, so I hope that this short interview helped some of you understand what this painting is all about. And of course, Shawn, thank you very much for joining me.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And it's been a delight to be here with all of you.